It's that time of year in the NASCAR season where contracts start getting negotiated. We start to hear murmurs of potential rumors for next season. And today we're going to talk about and speculate a lot about what 2019 could hold for NASCAR. How's it going, everyone? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Big episode here today. I've been planning it for a while now, and there's been some more rumors popping up recently, so I'm really excited to talk during today's episode, because we're talking about silly season, which I still hate that name, but it's what everyone else calls it. It's, where the point in the season where we start to predict where drivers will be next season. And there's a lot of speculation around guys like Kurt Busch, Jamie McMurray's names have come up recently. Martin Truex Jr., some drama there. Jimmie Johnson still has some question marks, and then Roush with Trevor Bayne and Matt Kenseth. There are a lot of high-profile drivers who could potentially be switching rides next year, and there's a lot of rumors out there. And so in today's episode, I wanted to look at a few of the biggest ones and give you some of my thoughts and just let you know what could be happening next season. So let's get started. I'll go ahead and start with the defending series champion, Martin Truex Jr. Because both him and the team he's driving for, Furniture Row Racing, have contracts that are up at the end of 2018. Technically, Truex's contract with Furniture Row is done after this year, and Furniture Row, their contract with Toyota and JGR is also done after this season. And it's obvious that this partnership that Furniture Row has had with JGR has been quite lucrative. They have arguably been better than the JGR cars the last couple seasons. So clearly, if you're Barney Visser and the rest of the Furniture Row team, you want to get a deal done with Toyota, and as far as we know, talks have been going on behind the scenes with Toyota to try and get them renewed with that manufacturer and hopefully continue an alliance with JGR. But as is the case with a lot of these kind of behind the scenes NASCAR deals, all the people involved are very tight-lipped about this topic. There's rumors that JGR could be asking for a little bit more from Furniture Row, because I think Joe Gibbs Racing knows that Furniture Row Racing has really benefited from this partnership, so they know Furniture Row Racing wants to stay with them, so I think Gibbs is trying to push it and say hey, maybe we can get a little bit more from you guys. So I don't really know how those contracts are going to play out, but I think it's probably likely they'll stick together. They'll still be with Toyota and they'll still be with JGR to some extent, so that's what I would think, but it's not certain. And if I was Martin Truex Jr., I would definitely not sign any contract to stay on with Furniture Row until the deal with JGR and Toyota is hopefully ironed out, because otherwise it'd just be too risky. You're right now one of the hottest drivers in the sport. I'm sure plenty of other teams that potentially have open rides would be willing to open their doors for you, or open their windows, because NASCAR race cars don't have doors. Oh God, what a pun. There is the other issue of sponsorship as well. 5 Hour Energy, it was announced a few weeks ago, will not be coming back next season to sponsor that 78 car. So now the 78 has almost half their schedule still unsponsored. Recently, Furniture Row Racing said that they've been having productive talks with potential sponsors. So if you ask me, I think it's likely. There's still a lot of time until 2019. We have many months. I think it's likely that they get a deal done to sponsor the majority of the races. I think they're going to fill most of that gap. I mean, since last season, they went from being virtually unsponsored to Bass Pro Shops, auto owners, and 5 Hour Energy came on out of nowhere to sponsor this season. So Truex has been able to add a lot of sponsors the last couple years because they keep winning. So I think Furniture Row will be okay. They also said recently that they will be racing in 2019. So even if they don't get sponsorship, they will still be fielding a car next year. So anyway, that's just an interesting thing. If you want my opinion, I think he stays there. I think Furniture Row gets a deal with Toyota and JGR. It may not be quite as good of a deal as they had before, but I think he stays with them. So moving on from there, I want to talk about the big rumor that hit this last weekend right before the race. Kurt Busch has been kind of in limbo with SHR the last couple of years. He technically was not signed on for this 2018 season until last minute. They decided to pick up his option. Monster Energy, that whole sponsorship, since they sponsor the top of the series, they've been kind of not sponsoring the 41 car as much, so he's had some sponsorship issues. So his whole deal with SHR this year has been kind of rough. And things got weirder last week when Motorsport.com reported that Kurt Busch had signed on with Chip Ganassi and was going to be taking over the 1 car from Jamie McMurray. That report came out, and obviously when Kurt was asked questions, when Chip Ganassi was asked questions, they said, oh, nothing's been finalized, blah, blah, blah. Typical, hasn't been officially released yet, so they're not going to say anything now. There's no point. But Motorsport.com is a pretty big name, that's something that if they're going to report it, it's probably true. It was reported a few days earlier that Kurt Busch had been in talks with Chip Ganassi. Nothing had been confirmed at that point, but now it seems like there's a very good chance Kurt Busch is going to be in with Chip Ganassi Racing next year. Some people seem skeptical about this report, but honestly, it makes 100% sense to me. I love Jamie McMurray. He's a great guy. He's been a really good driver for most of his career, and he's kind of bounced between some, not great cars. He hasn't had top equipment ever, except maybe early in his career with Roush. He had a couple of years where maybe, he made the playoffs though in a Roush car, so he's not like he was bad. But this year, Jamie McMurray has fallen off a cliff. Whether it be the fact that Chevy as a manufacturer hasn't been as good as usual or something else. I mean, he's outside the top 20 in points, and McMurray's a guy who last year, he pointed his way in. I think he was 13th or 14th in points and made it in on points. So he's really just just dropped off significantly this year. So maybe some bad luck, maybe some just bad cars that he's not used to driving, but McMurray has not looked as good this year. Kyle Larson's still been able to run top 10, whereas Jamie McMurray is kind of, he's not doing nearly as well as he did last year, or the year before, or the year before, or the year before. Plus, he's now one of the older guys in the Cup Series, so it just makes sense to me that Chip Ganassi would possibly go a different direction. I'm not going to sit here and say Kurt Busch would save all of his problems, because Kurt Busch is driving the same equipment that Kevin Harvick is, and he has not won a race since February of 2017? Yeah, it's been over a year and a half since Kurt Busch won a race. Clint Bowyer's won a couple times since then. So Kurt Busch also, is a past champion. He's a good driver. He's had off-the-track issues in the past, but those seem mostly behind him. So he's not a bad pick. I think he would be an upgrade from Jamie McMurray. How much of an upgrade? Now that remains to be seen. And there's rumors that he could drive that car for a couple of years, and then maybe John Hunter Nemechek or somebody else takes it over in a couple of years. But those are completely rumors. The Motorsport.com report seems legit, and it hasn't been confirmed, but it seems highly likely that Kurt Busch will be in the 1 car next year for Chip Ganassi. So I guess there you have it. Jamie McMurray, I don't know what's next for him. If nobody wanted to pay Matt Kenseth's salary last year, I have a hard time believing that Jamie McMurray is going to be able to get a decent ride. It's just my opinion. So. And speaking of Matt Kenseth, Roush Fenway Racing could be in a very interesting spot this offseason. They started this year with 2 full-time drivers, Stenhouse and Trevor Bayne, and then just a couple months into the season they announced that Trevor Bayne was going to only be racing half the races and Matt Kenseth was coming out of retirement to race the other half, pretty much. It's no secret that those Roush cars aren't that good right now, but of the 2, Trevor Bayne was consistently the weaker link, so it made some sense, I guess, for Roush to make that move kind of as from a competition standpoint to see if Matt Kenseth could come in and maybe figure something out or help them figure something out that could make them more competitive. It's kind of what happened for Furniture Row Racing when they had Regan Smith, then Kurt Busch, then Martin Truex. That team suddenly became a championship contender. And Matt Kenseth, obviously a veteran driver, very good at what he does. It made sense. But now the discussion is what's next for 2019 because, Ricky Stenhouse is still under contract. He's got a lot of sponsorship. They've got some good partners on Stenhouse's car, so he'll be in the 17, or at least he'll be with Roush next year. As for that 6 car, will Trevor Bayne come back full-time? Will Matt Kenseth suddenly come on full-time and race next year? Does he even want to? Will they continue to split the ride? They've got some drivers, in the Xfinity Series, some like the Ty Majeskis, the Chase Briscoes, or even who's that Ford guy, Austin Cindric, who could possibly get some rides. The 17 with Stenhouse will be full-time, but that 6 car, will it field a full-time driver, or will it continue to be a revolving door of development drivers? Or will the 6 car completely drop off the face of the earth entirely? That's a real possibility as well, because I know Matt Kenseth brought some new sponsorship with Wyndham Rewards. They've got a couple other partners that have kind of come on here and there. But right now, that 6 car still is not very well funded, at least for next year. So I don't know what the answer is for Roush. Around the time that they made the announcement that Kenseth was coming back to race part-time, there were a lot of rumors going around that Trevor Bayne was done with Roush. Not that Trevor Bayne was mad at Roush, although he probably wasn't too happy, but more that Roush was they weren't planning on having Trevor Bayne race for them in the future. It basically sounded like Trevor Bayne was not a part of their 2019 plans. At least that's what some insiders were saying, I read on multiple occasions. Don't know if it's true, those are some really loose rumors, I don't know what to believe, but that was something that was apparently talked about somewhere. So then the question really is, does Matt Kenseth, who less than a year ago was racing for a championship in top equipment, does he want to come back next year at 47 years old and race full-time in a car that maybe at best he could get running around 15th? I'm a little skeptical, but to be honest, I did not see him coming back to race part-time this year, so I was shocked when he chose to do that, so this would shock me too. So, honestly, nothing surprises me at this point. An interesting nugget in this story that I did not know until recently is that when Wyndham Rewards, who's sponsoring Matt Kenseth for a handful of races this year, actually signed a multi-year deal with Roush. I don't know if that necessarily means they're guaranteed to only be with Kenseth, or if that means they could go sponsor Ricky Stenhouse in some sort of fashion. But the Wyndham sponsorship is a multi-year deal, which could open the door to Kenseth coming back for 2019. Again, he has said nothing that it would imply that he's coming back next year. Roush really hasn't said anything that would indicate have any indication on their future plans. So this is 100% purely speculation, but this is one of the more intriguing stories, at least to me. Because I'm a big Matt Kenseth fan, you got him kind of sneaking a peek over here. But it's also interesting to me because of the whole dynamic between the young drivers, the youth movement, and the older veteran drivers. I mean, Matt Kenseth is about as old, veteran, experienced as it gets versus these Trevor Baynes and Chase Briscoes and whatnot that are really inexperienced. It's interesting to me that Roush even brought Kenseth in at all. It makes me feel like they've lost faith in the youth movement, whereas all these other teams like Gibbs and Hendrick are really banking on the youth movement because that's what they think will propel their business forward. Roush said, hold on a second, pump the brakes, we got to get ourselves running better, and the only people we can count on to help us do that are veterans like Matt Kenseth. So that's why I think it's interesting to see, will the veteran driver ultimately win out and get that ride back, or will the young drivers eventually take over like they're expected to? That's why I think this is interesting. But anyway, it's all speculation. I don't even have a firm opinion on this. If you want my prediction, I have no prediction. I think it's 50-50 whether the 6 car even exists next year. I think if the 6 car does race next year, I think Matt Kenseth will be racing. I don't know if it's going to be full-time. That I'm really skeptical of. But I think Matt Kenseth will race in 2019 if the 6 car is still operational. Because Roush might just say, hey, screw it, we'll be a single car team. It's working for Furniture Row, you know, and maybe that's all we can do right now. So I don't know, but that's a very interesting speculation to me. So I don't know what you guys think, but let me know in the comments. Now, another big name driver who's still technically under contract for next season, but has some uncertainties surrounding him is Jimmie Johnson, the 7-time champion. Jimmie Johnson is still technically signed with Hendrick through next year, but it was announced a few months ago that Lowe's, who'd sponsored Jimmie basically every week for his entire career, would be stepping down from the 48 car next year. And since then, Hendrick has made no announcements as far as a new sponsor for that 48 car. It was, for a while there, Chad Knaus didn't even have a contract extension. Although a few weeks ago, it was announced that Chad Knaus had extended his contract with Hendrick through 2020. So it makes me think now that Chad Knaus and Jimmie Johnson are likely to stay at Hendrick for the next couple of years and might even retire together. But one rumor that's been going around quite a bit this year is that you never know, this could be Jimmie Johnson's final year in the Cup Series. There was a rumor that Red Bull could come sponsor him next year, which I don't really see where that's coming from. Rick Hendrick recently said that they've been in contact with 3 potential sponsors that could be on that 48 car, or one of them could, or all 3 of them. They've been in contact with several potential sponsors, but no confirmation just yet. And Jimmie Johnson is currently in the middle of probably his worst season in NASCAR ever. He's getting older. I think now he is the oldest full-time driver in NASCAR since Kenseth and Stewart have retired. And so there's some speculation that maybe Jimmie Johnson just hangs it up at the end of this year. Jimmie Johnson's already cemented himself as a top 2 or 3 probably driver of all time. 7 championships, which is tied for the most all time. What is he at, 83 wins? The dude's a living legend, if you ask me. And I'm not going to doubt his competitive nature because I know he's really competitive and undoubtedly would love to get that 8th championship. That would just mean the world to him. But realistically, he might just step back and say, hey, I've done it all. I'm good. And if they're not able to fully sponsor him next year, maybe that's incentive to just hang it up. You never know. If you want my opinion on this, I think Jimmie stays on. I think once that extension for Chad Knaus was signed, I'll bet Jimmie Johnson was involved in those conversations at least to some extent. So I have a good feeling that Johnson's going to stay on for at least a couple more years. Maybe he and Chad Knaus retire together. That would make the most sense to me. So I think Jimmie will still race next year, but we haven't heard what the sponsor will be. And, Jimmie is coming off. He's currently in the middle of his worst season in the Cup Series ever. So we haven't seen Jimmie like this before. This is the most vulnerable we've ever seen Jimmie Johnson, and who knows what he could do. Last thing I want to talk about, I want to hit on a few other kind of minor driver stories. There's some other rumors floating around. I just want to hit on a few kind of all at once. It's worth noting that Kyle Larson, his contract details have never been made public, so we're not sure when his contract is up. We don't know what the deal is with Kyle Larson. Chip Ganassi, though, as recently as last year said that Larson is not going anywhere, so it's safe to say Larson will be in that car still, but there's been speculation always that maybe he'll go to Hendrick one day, so on and so forth. That people say that Chip Ganassi's holding back Larson. A lot of people think he's one of the top 2 or 3 drivers in the sport, and he's kind of being held back by 15th place equipment. I would mostly agree with them on that assessment, but there's no real certainty as far as where Larson's concerned. Likely he'll still be in the 42 next year. Other notable news, Kasey Kahne, who's driving for Levine Family Racing in the 95 this year, there's been rumors. In fact, the owner of Levine Family Racing recently said that they are 90% sure that they're switching manufacturers next year. The 95 is a Chevy Camaro this year, but there's been rumors that they're going to be switching to Toyota and possibly, joining that Furniture Row JGR alliance. I don't know how that'll work, but there's rumors that they are going to be switching to a Toyota team next year. So that could be interesting because we saw how switching to Toyota helped Furniture Row. You never know. Kasey Kahne. You Kasey Kahne fans, there's still a lot of y'all out there. Kasey Kahne might not just be done quite yet. Some other names I've heard thrown around in rumors, Ryan Newman, Matt DiBenedetto, whose contracts I think are up after this season. I'm not certain on that. A lot of these details are not made perfectly clear or made public to a lot of people, but there is some uncertainty around their contracts. DiBenedetto is the kind of guy that's kind of been signing like 1-year deals lately, so his deal could be up, and a lot of people always say DiBenedetto deserves to be in a top ride. There's just not that many top rides out there, so we'll see, but DiBenedetto's a guy that I've heard his name thrown around as, you never know, he could end up in good equipment next year. You never know. I've heard rumors around JTG Doherty Racing. Their contract deals, again, not super clear, not super certain, but I've heard some rumors that possibly there could be a driver lineup change there. They have AJ Allmendinger and Chris Buescher, and I've seen some inside reports that perhaps there could be a major driver change there. I don't want to like make any big bold statements here because one, I'm afraid I'll be right, and I'll also be afraid or look bad if I'm really wrong, but there could be some pretty big changes at that team that could be announced sometime soon, so maybe keep your ears open for that. Also, I want to briefly mention Christopher Bell, because he's clearly the top championship favorite in the Xfinity Series, driving for JGR, so his name has come up a lot recently. He's made some interesting statements lately regarding his future in NASCAR, and so I wanted to talk about him briefly. Obviously, he's come up with the Kyle Busch Motorsports now, JGR Toyota system, and he's looking like the top championship favorite in the Xfinity Series this year. He's won several races. He's been great. He's like 22, 23 years old, I think, so he's still kind of a prospect, and it's clear that Gibbs does not want to lose Christopher Bell. He wants him to be a part of the team's future. But it was announced recently that Christopher Bell will be running Xfinity Series again in 2019, even though he's likely going to contend for the championship this year, and very good chance he's going to get it. And he made statements recently saying that he feels like he's in the prime of his career and that he doesn't want to waste another year in Xfinity. He wants to race in the Cup Series. That was a very interesting quote, because I appreciated the honesty from him. I mean, I don't blame him. He's clearly the best driver in Xfinity Series right now. He's got obviously probably the best equipment as well, but the two have gone hand in hand. He's won several races this year. He's beat Kyle Busch. He's beat the Cup guys on a regular basis. He looks as good as an Eric Jones, as a Chase Elliott. He looks as good as any of those guys we've seen in the Xfinity Series the last few years. But the problem is JGR is kind of full at the moment. I mean, they have Kyle Busch signed on for who knows how long. He's not going anywhere anytime soon. Hamlin's got FedEx backing the crap out of him. And then Eric Jones and Daniel Suarez are both still pretty new and, are still growing. Plus you got Truex over there, and they don't seem to have enough sponsorship for a 77 car. So Christopher Bell's Toyota future looks cloudy. I've said before that maybe there's a possibility that if Suarez continues to struggle next year, that 2020, Bell could move to the 19. I don't know how Suarez's deal works. I think he has Eris still signed on through next year, but 2020 could be murky. But Christopher Bell is a guy that people, with this Kurt Busch rumor lately, that people are saying maybe Truex Racing could scoop up Christopher Bell and he could drive the 41 next year. That's an actual rumor I've read. Now, Truex Racing has some decent drivers in their development system as well, like Cole Custer, whose name has been thrown around. Cole Custer, as good as he might be, is not Christopher Bell, but it might just make more sense for them to make that move. The future for Christopher Bell is bright in the sense that he has a lot of talent and will likely win races wherever he goes, but where will he go? And, that could definitely dictate, how many races he wins in the future. So this is an important year or so for him, and I don't blame him for wanting to get to the Cup Series as fast as possible, There was some news earlier this week about F1 driver Fernando Alonso announcing he's leaving F1. NASCAR's been trying to get him to come to them. There's rumors he'll go to IndyCar. Don't know what he's going to do, but there's a chance. Fernando Alonso's name. I'm not an F1 fan, guys. I'm trying to just remember what people have been telling me. Apparently he's really good in F1. I've definitely heard his name before this week. I've heard his name plenty of times, but I didn't know that much about him. But apparently he's really good. So that would be a good look for NASCAR if we got a big international star like that in our series. That'd be cool. But I don't see him going to the 41 car, getting any big rides. I don't see that happening this next season, but we'll see. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have. Check my notes again, but no, I think that's it. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed all these predictions. Make your own predictions down below. I want to hear what you guys think. Do you buy the rumor that McMurray is out and Kurt Busch is going to take his car? Do you think Christopher Bell ends up in Cup Series next year? Does Jimmie Johnson suddenly retire? Does Truex leave Furniture Row? What happens to Roush Fenway Racing? There's a lot of interesting things going around, circulating in the NASCAR rumor mill right now, and it's been fun to talk about it. But anyway, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. Links to those are down below. Thank you, of course, to our wonderful, amazing Patreon sponsors of the show. For $5 a month, you too can also be a Patreon sponsor. You can get your name on every single episode, as well as access to behind-the-scenes posts and photos and other things all like that. So check that link out down below, please. It helps me out a ton. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's all I have. I'll be in my new studio in about a week and a half, so I'm really excited for that. For now, you have to deal with me bouncing around rooms. This house is such bad lighting. I have a desk light over there and over there. The light's on right here. I've jerry-rigged this whole thing. I got cardboard Matt Kenseth here stalking me from below my seat. That's scaring me over here, but yeah, things are gonna get a lot more professional, a lot better, hopefully pretty soon. So hope you guys are looking forward to that, because I am extremely excited to see where this show and where this channel can go, because I think it has not even come close to hitting its ceiling yet. So thanks for sticking with me, everybody. I always appreciate the support, and I'll see you guys again maybe later this week, maybe after the race at Bristol. We'll see. But thanks, everyone. See you guys real soon.